Under the swollen sky, the valley trembled with a storm that seemed to split heaven from earth. Lightning carved the horizon into jagged scars, and rain poured in sheets, drowning every path in mud and shadow. Through the wild clamor rode Jameson, a giant of a man with shoulders bent beneath more than weather. His horse pressed on through the torrent, hooves striking sparks against stone as though protesting the weight of its master's burden. Jameson's face was worn, etched with solitude, the lines of a man who had wandered too long without anchor. Each mile of the storm bit at him, yet something deeper than instinct drove him forward, as if unseen hands guided his course through the chaos. It was then, at the bend of the trail, that his eyes caught two shapes strewn across the sodden earth. The forms were fragile, broken outlines half submerged in the mire, their stillness more terrifying than the thunder above. Jameson dismounted, boots sinking into the drenched soil as he bent down, and there, two young women lay motionless, wounds staining their clothes, rain mixing with the red of their injuries. His breath caught, for though the storm had offered him many hardships in years past, never had it delivered into his care such fragile souls. Kneeling, he pressed his ear to their lips and felt the faint, rattling stir of breath. They lived barely. A man of steel might have ridden past, whispering a prayer, but Jameson's calloused hands trembled as he gathered them both against his chest. They were light, too light, as though life itself had already abandoned half its claim on them. The storm lashed against him, but he mounted again with his precious burden. His heart pounded not from fear but from a strange awakening, as if something long buried in him stirred, demanding he not let death have them. Was this chance, or was it fate's cruel mercy, placing strangers in his path to test the weight of his soul? By the time his cabin appeared on the edge of the valley, the horse staggered from exhaustion. Jameson dismounted with care, pushing open the door to the single-room shelter where firewood lay waiting. With practiced urgency he built a blaze, coaxing flame from damp logs until warmth began to wrestle with the storm's chill. He laid the sisters on a blanket by the hearth, their breaths shallow but steady, faces pale against flickering firelight. He tended their wounds with rough gentleness, tearing his own shirt for bandages, cleaning cuts with water so cold it burned. All the while, he hummed old trail hymns, low and steady, as if his voice might anchor them to life. He had buried too many souls on these plains. He would not bury them too. Hours bled into silence broken only by fire and storm. Jameson leaned back at last, shoulders slumping, eyes fixed on their fragile forms. For the first time in years, his restless heart found stillness. Yet even as he drifted into uneasy slumber beside them, a question clawed at him. When morning came, would breath still warm their lips, or would dawn claim them for the grave? The answer came with sunlight piercing through rain-streaked glass. One of the sisters stirred, lashes trembling before her eyes opened, dark and luminous as twilight. Her lips, cracked and pale, moved with effort. "Are you the light that pulled us out of the darkness?" Her voice was thin, a fragile thread carried on breath alone. Jameson froze, every scar of his life narrowing to this moment. He knelt, brushing damp hair from her brow. "No light of mine," he said softly, "only a duty. Life is the most precious gift, and yours was not ready to leave." She blinked, as if the words sank deeper than her bones. He offered her a cup of water, steadying her trembling hand. She tried to sip, but her strength failed. Without thought, Jameson lifted the cup himself, guiding it to her lips. The intimacy of the gesture startled him, yet he did not falter. When he drew the cup away, her eyes glistened. "I have never felt such tenderness. It's as if you healed not just my wounds, but something deeper." Her younger sister, still silent but awake, watched with guarded suspicion, her gaze sharp and searching. Gratitude flickered there, yes, but so did a question that Jameson felt pierce his chest. What kind of man was he really, and what price might his kindness carry? Days passed in the rhythm of recovery. Jameson cooked simple meals, bread and broth, and fed them both until strength returned. At night he told stories of the plains, his voice weaving sagas of cattle drives, lost companions, and sunsets that bled gold into the earth. Naeli, the name he learned belonged to the elder sister, listened with rapt stillness. Sometimes she smiled, faint and fleeting, yet bright enough to soften the hardest corners of his spirit. He had known women before, but none whose silence seemed so full of music, whose presence made the cabin feel less like exile and more like a beginning. Still, he told himself it was nothing, a passing storm in his heart. But when she reached for his hand one morning, whispering, "You didn't just save my body, you restored my faith," Jameson's breath caught. The fire in his chest was no storm. It was something far more dangerous. By noon, the stillness broke. Riders appeared on the horizon, warriors of the tribe, led by Chief Greyhawk, their father. They dismounted with solemn dignity, eyes hard yet grateful. The chief embraced his daughters, tears breaking the stern mask of his face. Then he turned to Jameson, voice deep as stone. "You pulled them back from death's grasp. I can never repay this debt." Jameson bowed his head, replying simply, "It was no debt, Chief. Only belief." Yet Greyhawk insisted, presenting him with a black stallion, muscles like coiled thunder, and silver spurs that gleamed like starlight. Jameson accepted, though unease rippled beneath his gratitude. The gift was more than thanks. It was a bond, a tether he had not sought. In the chief's eyes lingered sorrow, as though he knew this bond might one day demand more than either man was ready to give. Naeli clung to her father, but when her gaze slipped back to Jameson, it did not waver. What invisible thread bound her to him, this wandering cowboy who asked for nothing? Life in the valley shifted like a tide. Jameson remained, teaching Naeli the rhythms of his world. He placed a bow in her hands, guiding her fingers along the string, adjusting her stance with careful patience. She laughed when her arrow missed, the sound light as river water. He smiled without meaning to, the warmth in her joy undoing years of loneliness. In the pastures, he showed her how to tend cattle, stroking a calf's head as he said, "To understand animals is to keep the heart soft." She met his gaze, replying, "Perhaps that is why your heart feels so vast." They built a birdcage together, wood shaping under their joined hands. When she whispered, "We're creating a shelter for another, just as you became one for me," Jameson felt a truth he could not deny. She was no longer a stranger. She was the morning star in his sky. Her younger sister teased them, laughter ringing from behind a tree, but Jameson's unease deepened. Was this bond a fleeting rainstorm, or the beginning of a river that would never run dry? The answer came in fire. One night, the ground trembled beneath hoofbeats, and torches flared against the horizon. The bandits had returned, shadows riding with blood on their blades. Jameson's voice roared across the village. "Listen! This land is our mother. Tonight we shield her with our lives. Every breath we take is her debt, and tonight we repay it." The young warriors rallied, women leading children to safety. Battle crashed like thunder, gunfire, steel, dust, and cries of fury shattering the still night. Jameson fought with savage grace, rifle cracking, fist striking, a wall of flesh and resolve. He saw a raider charge Naeli, blade raised. Without thought he hurled himself forward, firing point-blank, pulling her into his chest. She looked up at him, breathless, whispering, "Without you, my sun would have gone dark." He shook his head, murmuring, "No, Naeli. As long as your eyes hold light, this world can never be dark." But fate turned again. Another bandit lunged for Jameson, knife glinting. Before he could strike, Naeli loosed an arrow with steady hands, striking true. The bandit fell, and Jameson, stunned, looked at her with pride blazing. "Your courage," he said, "is the greatest strength in my heart." Together they fought, shields for one another, until at last dawn broke and the bandits fled. Victory cries rose, yet Jameson stood in the smoke, trembling. In that fire, something greater had been forged. But what would it cost? The tribe celebrated. Chief Greyhawk, voice thick with emotion, declared before his people, Jameson, you saved not just my daughters, but the honor of my people. Morning Star shall be yours. The wedding followed, a joining of two souls bound by blood, fire, and grace. Hands clasped, eyes locked, Jameson and Niele stood as if the world itself had paused. Her sister laughed, calling out, "Love has won a battle of its own." Yet Jameson's heart wondered, could a love forged in fire withstand the quieter storms of life? Years drifted by, soft as dust on the plains. In the golden hush of an afternoon, Jameson and Niele sat outside their homestead, their newborn daughter cradled in her arms. The air smelled of earth and wildflowers, the fields alive with peace. Jameson brushed a hand against Niele's cheek, whispering, "Time may tire, but our love never will." She smiled, eyes glistening with a light that had guided him through storms, through battles, through loneliness itself. Behind them, laughter echoed from the fields where their people thrived, and before them stretched a horizon unbroken. And to the hearts that would one day remember their tale, the wind carried this truth: love and humanity are the truest weapons of strength. A hand that saves, a heart that protects, and a soul that loves, these can heal wounds deeper than war and bind strangers stronger than blood. Where kindness becomes duty and love becomes courage, peace blooms eternal.